The next section or idea to discuss here is, and this is what people really want to know, is how to be successful with your advertising. And we have this topic that we talk a lot about, not just between myself and Alan, but with all of our clients as well. And it's the idea of economics.
Well,
So,
can I jump in before you say that, before you get into
yeah,
that?
okay.
I just want to talk about this thing. There's like, so when it comes to advertising online, right? There's two parts, right? There's the mechanical part, there's the creative part. And what was the third part I had in our notes? There was like a third
Yeah,
part to it.
it's all in here.
I can't find it. Okay. So it's like, that's it. So it's like a lot of people think that, in order to become successful advertising, you have to get mechanically good, right? So like there's the outside got it. Thanks, Robert. So we have like, people think that, you have to know how to run ads. Okay. Well, I'll tell you, like, you can just go on Facebook and use their, free like training. It's like free, right? Or Google is free training. They all have free training because ultimately their end goal is for you to go spend money with them, right? So they're going to make it simple. They're going to make it very easy. You can learn it in a weekend. Like when I started Facebook ads, like I learned it like in 2 days. It was just like looking at it. Okay, this is done, right? So there's like, that's the mechanical part. There's the creative part, which is creating the ads, whatever. And there's a strategic part, right? So a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about is the strategic part, because that's the part that most people never learn. And that's also the part that's hardest to learn. And the only way you can really learn it is by losing a lot of money. And you got to pay for the education, right? And so mechanical part is very easy, and we're not really going to dig deep into that. And you go learn how to set up ads like in a weekend. That's and there's a million courses out there teaching that. That's not what this is about, right? Creative, same. We're going to talk about creative, but strategic, like essence, like how to succeed in advertising, is going to be heavily focused on like strategic elements of why we do things and how they work, so you can go do it. And this is going to give you the real competitive advantage over everybody else, because I'll tell you, everybody out there is focused on the mechanical and it's a little bit of creative, right? Mechanical and creative. They're okay. Let them do things. But the strategic part is like where it's really, really important. It's going to allow you to win.
Yeah, that's so true. A lot of people focused on naming conventions and targeting, but
yeah. So exactly, like, so you go into some of these like Facebook groups, that are talking about Facebook ads, and it's like, hey, I should structure it like this. Should I do this? This about this, about that, and like that's really, that's fine, but it's like, I don't know, maybe 2% of the importance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. So if we do talk about the strategic part of this, one thing that we talk a lot about between you and I, and also with all of our clients, is the idea of economics and how having good economics in your business actually allows you to have weak advertising and still make it work. And so let's elaborate on that a bit. So can you first just kind of brush people up on the idea of economics? Like, what is economics in terms of business?
Right. So historically speaking, like, when I first started doing this, like, I had no money to start, right? And I was like, okay, if I had to master one skill, what would it be, right? It was copywriting, right? And I got really, really, really good at copywriting, right? Because my thing was like, if I can sell, then I can generate revenue, I can make money online, okay? And then at some point, like, even though my copy was good, I noticed people with suboptimal copy, suboptimal skills were crushing it. And like, I was like, well, what are they doing that's different, right? And I realized they're competing on economics, right? They're not competing on skills, right? So like, you can either compete on like pure creative skills, or you can compete on economics. The best example would be like Ferrari or Lamborghini, right? They compete on skills, like skills of craftsmanship, right? So like, both companies, like Ferrari got bought by Fiat, and I think Lamborghini got bought by Volkswagen, right? So like, but Volkswagen and Fiat, they both work on economics, right? So they beat them, right? Because like economics always beats skills, okay? And the equivalent story of that is basically like, let's say you're in a UFC match. I know you're a huge UFC fan, Robert. It's like, you can have like the best UFC fighter in the world, right? And you can have like 3 couch potato fat guys, like, who play video games all day, whatever. And if those 3 guys can beat the best UFC fighter, just based on the fact they have more energy, right? Okay. And so that's basically it. And so it's like working with numbers that beat, that overpower everything else, right? And the numbers that only matter is basically this. It's like the ability to pay more to acquire a customer in a marketplace, okay, on an advertising platform, while simultaneously at the same time not losing money doing so, okay? So those 2 rules apply. So your economics should allow you to pay than anybody else on the platform to acquire a customer, and while at the same time not losing money, okay? And then the rule of, a lot of this is like, from market to market, et cetera, it's different. Every market's different. Every situation is different. But like we developed some rules of thumb, because we work with a ton of people doing this. We've seen like so many offers. And basically it's like 10x of your front-end product, right? So like if your product is like $5, like let's say your book or course, or if you sell it for $5, if you can spend like $50, which is 10x of the price point to acquire a customer, you can pretty much run on, Facebook, YouTube, Google, whatever, right? You can run anywhere, right? Because the reality is like that elasticity of the price is very difficult to get for most people, right? You get that 10x through upsells. I don't know if you want to talk about this in here, Robert, but let me know. We can kind of dig into it through upsells, cross sells, bumps, multi option checkouts, whatever. But that's the rule. And now, like, if you have a $10 product, and if you can spend $100, you can run anywhere. Now the thing is, like, so you're like, well, what if I sell a $1 product and I can spend $10 to acquire a customer? Doesn't work. Like under $5, the math starts to I think like under $4, $5, the math just doesn't work. Okay. It's like, there's this like golden area of the math where it kind of makes sense. And that starts like $50 and up. So like if you have $100 products and you can spend like $1,000 to acquire a customer, you can run anywhere. Right. And that's economics.
Yeah. And so to kind of paint a clear picture of what this is about, it's like if you have two people, one of them is selling a book and he might even be selling it on Amazon, right? So he's selling it on Amazon and maybe he's running ads to the book on Amazon. So he sells that for $10 and whatever he gets to keep, I don't know, $7. But that's it. Because it's on Amazon, there's no upsells and so on. It's just that book and he gets $7 per sale, which means he could spend $7 per sale on advertising to kind of break even on that. And so what if you do it a different way where you have the book and then you have two upsells right after? So instead of having a $7 or $10 average order value where you keep 7, you would have, say, a $35 average order value. This is what we're saying here is one guy is making $7 per sale, one is making $35 a sale. So even if the guy with who gets the $7, if he has perfect advertising, the other guy who's making 35, he can have really weak advertising and he's going to crush that other guy because what Alan said, he's competing on economics. He's not competing on advertising or marketing. He's not competing on the creative side or of the ad. He's competing on the economics. So his math checks out way better. And that would allow him to win even with weak advertising. And so that's kind of our goal here, right? Is to get you to a place where you can actually, not be an expert on advertising and still crush the competition. So
right. There's one more important thing to add. I know, I talk to a lot of guys and they come to us and they're like, oh, I'm running this book off. I'm like, okay, awesome. I'm running this course, selling core, whatever. I'm like, what volume do I'm like, what's your numbers? And their numbers look really good. And then I ask, well, how many are you selling? Right. And they're like, well, I'm selling 8 to 12 books a day. Right. I'm like, okay, well, anybody can sell 8 to 12, 20 books a day and numbers will look great. That's the variance is not that high. Right. So what the thing is, you have to be, you have to get close to 10x of the price point as much as possible. I mean, will you get there? I don't know, getting to 90% of it, 80% is still good, right? Some people get to 120% of the 10x value, whatever. So you get to 8x to 12x, right? That's kind of the area to be in. 10x is ideal. So what happens is when you're running out there, running ads, the way the math looks at 50 sales or 10 sales a day is not what math looks like at 50 sales a day or 200 sales a day or 500 sales a day or 1,000 sales a day. The numbers, because you have to go, when you're running it on various ad networks, they'll expose you to more people, right? And so when you're getting very low volume, say 8 to 10 books a day, what happens is the ads are very narrow to the people who are hyper interested, they're buyers, etc. But as you grow, that reach goes to people who are less interested. So it dilutes the effectiveness of advertising. And then what you have to do is you have to have that 10x AOV, average order value, to compensate for that, right? And that way you don't lose money, So remember, you can pay more to acquire customers than other people and then not lose money, which is important. We'll have very low budgets of say $20 a day, and it'll take them a month and a half to get a conclusive test of what works and what doesn't work, right? Versus if you have the right economic model, you can spend $500 a day and know what works, what doesn't work within a few days, right? So the speed is very important. But this idea, we got from Dan Kennedy. And so just want to say, this is his concept here. And I encourage everybody to go, buy everything he has. Like, go buy all his books, go buy all his courses, go.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, because the next thing that I was going to ask you about is this idea that you've brought up before, which is the idea and the truth that you have to pay for people who buy your stuff, but you're also paying for everybody who's not buying your stuff when it comes to exposing your advertising to them. And most people don't buy your stuff. So I guess you were kind of touching on this and kind of answering this, but anything to add to that as far as like, how do you actually make sure that you're advertising in a way that you can, pay for people that also don't buy your stuff?
Like, so people think that you're only paying for customers that you get, but you're also paying for customers you don't get, right? So all the people that don't come to your page, they come to your page but don't buy, you're still paying for them, right? So how do you monetize them? Okay, so you generate leads, you can do retargeting, you can sell them other stuff. So you have to look at it like that, and you have to increase the AOV contribution. So like a lot of people that we work with, their whole idea is like to focus on conversions, right? Oh, my offer converts at this, my upsell converts to this, right? Well, conversions are, percentage points are irrelevant unless they're attached to a number, right? So like, I convert 25% of what, right? Like, why does it matter? So we work on attaching. We don't really work on the percentages. It's more we do about solid numbers, right? So like, we look at upsell take rates and everything as like contributions to AOV. So like, if your book is like, $5 or whatever, and your upsell is like $100, and you have 20% take rate, then that's $20 added to that order. So it's like you have $25, right? So, and then you have the basis AOV. So basis AOV is basically like, what's the minimum thing that person can buy in order for your AOV to work? So if your book is $5, your basis AOV is $5, and you're just adding to it through the different things, right? But the thing is, like, you also pay for people that don't buy your stuff, and you can use those people to add to that basis AOV, right? Okay, so you can generate leads, you can promote affiliate products, you can promote retargeting, affiliate products, you can increase the branding value, you can do follow-up, etc. You can buy them later. And so like we have like extensive follow-up. I don't know if it's in these notes, but let me see if I can pull this up from our and this is actually coming from the stuff that we work with the high-end clients, so you guys are getting a peek into some really good stuff. When I talk about that thing, Robert, where we talk about you have people that are buy now, buy later, not now,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that. So here we go. So here so this is excerpt right here that I'm gonna get into is a little bit of a detour than what we have intended for this course, but it's really important. And this comes from this is from the back end of the theory calls that we talk about with our high-end clients. So when you're doing marketing, right, you're paying for people who buy your stuff, and paying for people who don't buy your stuff, right? So like on our offers that we run, we typically see a conversion rate on the front end of 8 to 15%, right? So you see that now. On average, and that's like a $5 to $10 price point, right? So if you go up to a higher price point, you have less percentage conversion rate, but you have higher money, et cetera. It's just math, right? However it works out, right? But basically, on a good day, you have like let's say 3% of the people that see your ads who are what we call instant buyers, right? And also a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about was co-developed with my buddy Jay, just to give him credit. Jay Debo, genius, brilliant marketer, right? And so he had a lot of impact on this. So we had a call one night, and we were just kind of like, me and him will do 2-3 hour calls and talk about marketing. And this is one of those discussions that came about. So he co-developed this with me. It's really smart. So basically, it's like 3% on a good day are instant buyers, right? So you don't need to, you don't need to convince them beyond what their current marketing is, right? Then you have 15 to 25% of the people who never buy, okay? And they're not the right target market. It's not for them, okay? So 15 to 20% of the people that come to your page will never buy your stuff. There's nothing you can do. Like, it's just not for them. It's not the target market. They're usually the people who just, will bitch and moan on ads, like that you gotta, ban from the page, et cetera, right? But in between those two, you have a few different segments, right? So you have what's called a not now buyer, right? And so a not now buyer is basically somebody that says, you know what, I want to buy this, but not now. And the reason, they're like, stay in touch with me because at some point I'm going to buy. They don't have the time right now. The pain is not urgent enough. So you have to kind of twist the knife a little bit to kind of move them, over the edge so for they buy. And also there's like a physical limitation. So for example, somebody could be on the school bus or something, and they don't really, they really don't have time. So they just follow up with me, or a meeting, just call me later. There's ones also that don't believe in you. So you need to, they need more proof. Okay. And so, the remedy for that is social proof and testimonials. Then there's the I don't have enough information yet type of people, right? And you do value bombs to them, and you give them more information. And then you have a subset of that is like, will this work in my current situation? And, the remedy of that is so you can send them a survey, you can dig deeper to figure out what their situation is. It's a little more complex. I mean, Robert's really good at automation, but I really wouldn't go that far, because at that point you're just nitpicking details that, it's not going to add much contributions to the basis AOV. And then the next one is really interesting, is that, I'm okay if this works and I don't believe I can do it, right? So that's a big segment of the people. And I don't believe I can do it. And like a lot of people we work with are like, well, I know this works, but I don't believe I can write the book. I don't believe I can do a course. I don't believe that, right? And so, the ones that say, I don't believe I can do it, there's ones that say, I believe I can do it, but I don't believe I will do it, right?
Yeah.
And then it says, the way you talk to them is you simplify things. That's how you kind of bring them back. And there's also the ones that says, I don't have money, right? And so you build a perceived value up and sell on outcomes if they don't have money, because the reality is like the entire Western civilization, most Eastern now is run on credit. So everybody has money, I mean, very few people actually have like real lack of money in the world, in my opinion. And then you reverse the objections, you give them money back guarantee and the people. And then of course, last resort for the no money people is discounts, right? And so this is the thing that Jay really drove home, which is really important. And like, we're really big believers in giving credit where credit's due. We don't want to like jack anybody's ideas, but he said that, and we did this too for a long time. It's like the first thing you do is just give them discounts, right? And it's like when somebody like, when you're buying advertising out there and people are not buying your stuff and you're still paying for them, the first tendency is like, hey, here's a discount. Well, if your product is like $5 to $10, like how much more discount can you give them, right? And we did that. Like we did that. We're like, here's a discount to like $2 or $1 or $1 trial. And it's just stupid, because what happens is like, if you give somebody a discount on the front end, then they want a discount on the upsell. So that's one, like, we call it dark lore tricks, one of the dark lore tricks. So like if you're going to have like a $50 product, you sell it for half, and they want half on the upsells, et cetera, right? So like when we used to run webinars, if somebody did a multi-pay option, then the upsells had to be multi-pay, and then the take rates will go through the roof, right? Because they get a multi-pay mentality. So so people want discounts, right? And the thing is, it does work, but for the lowest hanging fruit, and it's the customers you don't want. Those customers don't typically take upsells. They don't buy your high ticket program. They're not really good in the community. And you only basically convert 2 to 6% when you default to a discount, right? And so what we do is, I don't think we're going to go into depth with this course, but what we do is we go through this entire sequence that I just outlined when we are creating follow-ups, right? In ads, in emails, and SMS, and everything. And that's the kind of the timeline we take people through based on these segments. And then, that 15 to 25% that never buy, there's really not much you can do to get them, right? So you don't focus on that.
Yeah. And what's interesting about discounts, just as a sort of a side note, is I've been thinking about this because I think you brought it up that if you're discounting, because I think I made a point to you that the people that take discounts or that buy on a discount, they're typically bad customers. And I think you brought up the point, but what about if I get a $5,000 discount on a car or something like that? And I think to distinguish that is like people who only buy things that are very inexpensive already at a discount, they, at least from my experience, have been quite bad customers. So you probably don't even want, like you were saying, if something is $5 and you pull it down to $3, if somebody was motivated by those $2, is that really a person you want to be doing business with? And so that was just a little, side thing about discounts. So it's kind of a lazy way of getting the sale. And oftentimes the people, at least again, at these small price points, it's not bad. Sorry, it's not good customers that you want anyway, if that's the thing that you have to resort to.
And just to clarify, like these are not like, we're not saying these are bad people or anything. It's just that it's like they don't, like there's the other remedy, like they don't believe in you, they don't, et cetera. A lot of guys resort to what we call trick pricing, right? And trick pricing is like, it's really $50, but I'll let you try it, or whatever, and this and that, and it's like, it's fine if the value's there, and you genuinely have somebody wanting to try something, but like if you can't convert on other mechanisms, something is wrong with your advertising or sales copy, right? Like the last resort you should do is using price as a tool of conversions, right? Because the thing is, like what we do with direct response marketing is that we create massive price elasticity, because everything we sell, it's not a commodity, right? It's very unique. It's special, right? So like, for example, like, our book, exactly. We call it exotic knowledge, man. We have like on my notes right here, we talk about for the backend calls, it's like, I think it's like 1,500 paragraphs I have here. And it's like, yeah, it's like we have like, I think like so far like 80 calls or something, and they're like all different. It's like I forget there's so much stuff in there, but exotic knowledge, right? So we sell exotic knowledge. And what happens like when you sell exotic knowledge, the pricing elasticity is up because it's unique. So like you can't go to a Honda dealership and get a Ferrari, right? You can't go to, you know, Toyota dealership and get a Lamborghini, right? Like it's called an exotic car for a reason. And the word exotic attaches a massive price that people are willing to pay. I think like their backlog is like a year or two now, right? So it's really interesting. And like there's this whole notion of people are like, well, people don't have money. People like everybody can spend $5 on a book. Okay. If you can't get somebody to spend 5, 50, 10, 50 bucks on a book, it's like you know, something's wrong with your marketing, right? And what's really crazy is that I see that happening a lot. It's like people can't make $5 book work. And now there's this other factor of like, it's not that people are buying, it's the networks. They're kind of like gauging the prices, the way they're allocating buyer value, but that's irrelevant, right? And so it's like the marketing should dictate the price. The price shouldn't dictate the marketing, right? And the way it works is like, for example, what's really fascinating about like Honda as a company, right? Like Honda, like when they build a car, right? Like they'll go, okay, we're going to sell a car for $20,000 because this is our target market, right? And what they do is they're like, give me the best car, best price, best everything, durability that can last like 10 years, et cetera, with warranty, everything. And they'll build it, okay? And then they build this spec. When Ferrari or Lamborghini builds a car, they're like, let's build a car, or like Koenigsegg, right? Like they're like, let's build a car and we'll just do whatever we want to it. And then after we build it, we'll figure out what the price is. And it's like super high, right? And people, there's like a waiting list, right? So it just depends who you want to sell to. The biggest difference about who you want to sell to is not really the money. It's like the money is like the gatekeeper of who you let in, so to say, right? Because like if somebody can afford, let's say, a car for $200,000-$300,000, okay, you know, it's not the part that's really telling about that person is like, okay, that person has the capability to generate money in order to buy that car. So therefore, if you know human nature is going to hold its thing, that person is going to have money in the future to spend more money, right, on things. That's why like when you know you shop at a luxury goods store and you spend a lot, like let's say for example like Louis Vuitton, you spend 20-30 grand, you know, you go in, they know you, right? They know what's up. Like, hey, we got something for you in the back, it's whatever, like, you know, one of a kind, etc. But it's like if you're selling to people whose limiting factor is money, then you're going to have a real hard time selling them more stuff later, because essentially, you know, there's a lot more stuff that comes before you, like, you know, like water, electricity, food, rent, mortgage, car payment, all this stuff, right? All these things. So what happens is like when you're focusing on just getting the lowest common denominator of price, you're also limiting yourself to future potential revenue, because the way we view people and customers is like a renewable financial resource, right? So like when Verizon or somebody like, you know, like these big companies, when they look at their demographic data, they're like, okay, average American has an income of $50,000. How can we get $1,200 out of them a year? Okay, they need a cell phone, and then they do it like that, right? What we do is a lot more elastic, but it should be still put into consideration. Now, with that in mind, you should give tremendous amount of value in your products. That's what we teach. Like even if somebody gives $5, and even if they can't afford anything else, you should still help them out as much as you can.
Yeah, of course. But it is a valid point. It's like ultimately, you know, for us, for example, you know, we have other more expensive products to sell where we are providing even more value and helping out even more. And if the way that we get somebody in the door is through a $2 discount, there's no way they're going to be buying those other products. And I think that's the case for most people that are here with us today, which is that they also have other things to sell. And so if you have to bait people in through a $2 discount, you know, that's why they're a bad customer. It's not that they're a bad person, is that they're not going to buy the other things that you have to sell. But let's switch gears a little bit. We're still sort of on the topic of, you know, how to succeed with your advertising. So one really important pillar of that, and thankfully due to the times that we live in, this is quite easy now compared to, you know, I kind of touched on it before, this idea of, you know, not being able to properly track your ads and so on. So Alan, what thoughts do you have about just kind of, you know, data-driven decision-making, and how nowadays, you know, a lot of advertising really just kind of comes down to testing a lot of different ads and sort of letting the numbers do the work for you, as opposed to maybe, you know, trying to be creative and not really having the data to make decisions?
Yeah, that's a big one. So it should all be data driven, right? Because I think it's like Well, again, detour. So like there's this idea of, data, right? So people say, okay, this is data, this is the data set, whatever. But like beyond that, there's two types of data sets. There's subjective and objective data, okay? Objective data is looking at data for what it is. Okay, like these are numbers, okay? So numbers don't lie, these are numbers. And there's subjective data, it's like I feel about this, right? And so you have to really distinguish between subjective and objective data, okay? And then like only objective data should be allowed to be there, right? And then even an objective data, you really got to ask, is it really objective? Like, is there anything there that's kind of polluting this data to make sure it's working all right? And with that in mind, it's like we work with a lot of people. They'll go run ads, and it's like, something's like working, whatever, in 2 days, or something's not working in 2 days, or something needs a tweak. They start to freak out. They want to change things. That's objective data. Okay, you don't have enough data points to make a decision. Okay, so you need to figure out like how many data points do I have in here, does it work? So for example, one of the things that we always focus on is like, one of the things I will say is that advertising is important, and strategically, right? Mechanically and creatively, it's whatever, like anybody can do that, right? But a lot of the stuff that, a lot of your success is going to be on your offer, and offer is going to convert a lot of the sales for you. Like ad just gets them there, okay? And so when you're looking at the data, you need to figure out like what ecosystem the data is in. So like, is it in the Facebook ecosystem? Is it in the YouTube ecosystem? Is it in the Google ecosystem? Is it on Instagram? Where is it, right? And then looking at how the data works and does it make sense, right? So for example, like how many people saw your ad? So I know like one of the people we work with, it was Jeff Miller. Yeah, so we're working with Jeff Miller and his offer because he's in a high-end program. Like Jeff went around and there's like offer's not working. Okay, we're like, well, okay, why isn't it working? Let's look at the data. So we did a Zoom call with him. I'll look through his stuff, and it's like Jeff was targeting people from 18 to like 800 years old, like yeah, like he was targeting like dead people. He was targeting people that spoke like
Hebrew.
Yeah, like some like ancient languages and stuff. Like so, it was like all over the place, right? And I was like, okay, well, let's look at who's buying out of this data set, right? And like we found, I think it was like age range was like 24 to 48. I think I could be wrong. I can't remember. It's been a while, but we looked at that. So, okay, so nobody from 18 to 24 is buying your stuff. Nobody's after 48 is buying your stuff. Just stop running ads to them. He stopped running ads to them, and they're like, okay, let's look at this segment. Let's look at this segment. Let's do this. And we know there's little tweaks based on objective data. Okay. Because like typically what happens like in any marketing, advertising, whatever, well, like when somebody like puts up a campaign, somebody puts up an offer, people are like, well, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Well, nobody really has a whole holistic problem, right? You just have what's called a component problem, right? Okay. So it's like, do you like, and each component problem is like, well, do you have a sales problem? Do you have a marketing problem? Do you have advertising? Do you have a targeting problem? Do you have a,
creative?
Do you have creative? Like what's the problem in the process? Like what component is broken? Because like if you have a car engine, right? You ever drive a car and something goes out, you don't go, okay, the whole car is bad, right? The wheels are good, the seats are good, everything is good except this one piece in the engine, or maybe the tire blew out. You just fix that and the car's running, right? So same idea applies here. Same thing for health. Like, if people go to the doctor, it's like, it's like, oh, you have, bad kidneys. Well, it's like next thing you know, it's like, well, the whole body isn't bad. The rest of it's working fine. Just fix the kidneys and the person's fine.
Right.
So
that's a really, really important point. And now that you're talking about it, it makes me realize how many times in the past I've given up on projects because they weren't working and I didn't look for the component. I just kind of wrote the whole thing off instead, And I think that's very common.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. Everybody has this problem. And like, that's why like kind of when I did consulting in the past, they come to me and the first thing I'd be like, okay, what's the component here? And like, they're like, oh, it just doesn't work. I'm like, no, what's the component? You fix that one component and everything is good, right? And so like, so Jeff became like, and it was like working. Same thing with like another client of ours, Mike. He came to me the other day. He was running a YouTube campaign, I think in the dog training niche, does really well using our model. Like his offer went from killing it to like not working, right? Now we're like, what the hell, right? So like, we're like, okay, let's look at the data, right? And he's like, oh, the offer's dead, doesn't work. I'm like, it's not dead, right? I'm like, you just can't dial it. So we looked at everything, and it turns out ClickFunnels had one of those midnight updates. You know how they do a midnight update? They kind of like they'll do an update, they'll push it back, and something will happen, and the checkout form doesn't work, like And so that happened, and then like no good order for like, because the checkout page was bad. You fixed that, the thing was working. So when you look at it, you got to figure out like what exactly is the problem, right? And the way you do it, you go top to bottom. Like, okay, are people responding to your ads? Yes. Okay, then you don't have an ad problem. Are people clicking your ads? Yes. Are they coming to your page? Yes. You look at the, you look at the entire funnel and you say, okay, which component here is stopping the flow, right? So imagine like you have like a flow of water from like a river, right? At what point is there like a choke that's preventing the water from flowing? And then like once you identify that, you look at That's how you fix that component problem. But yeah, that's how you look at data. And you got to look at data like geometrically, right? You got to look at it from different angles. So for example, certain age, certain age of people are going to convert better. Like genders are going to have different CPAs, different AOVs, right? Time of day, weekday. So when I was running the supplement business, had a supplement company, we had like Tuesdays were our bad days. I think, yeah, like Tuesdays were our bad days. So the cost of conversions was like way high and the value of the customer was way low. And then like we found Saturday to be like really high. So we just, reduced our budget by 90% on Tuesdays and then basically increased it by 90% on Saturday. And then it was like huge, right? So you have to look at like what, day parting, what days is converting. But the thing is, it's like every network is different, right? Because of this thing called intent. So on Facebook, you really don't have intent at all. And what you do is you have these like the social graph, right? Which you have people being placed in different buckets of intent, right? And like their level of intent is activity based on like these, like it's like a hive, right? So like if you have 1,000 people who are buyers, you're in this buyer bucket, and then they look at buyer as far as the recency goes. So it's like, instant buyer, 24-hour buyer, 7-day buyer, 36-hour buyer, 72-hour, 30-day buyer, 60-day buyer, whatever, right? And so like that's how Facebook computes the cost per click and stuff like that, because like they look at everybody differently, and then you have this aggregate, right, of different people. So if you ever bought something on Facebook, you're a lot more valuable to them because they can sell your click and your attention for a lot more than somebody who never buys, right? Because they know that you will produce a certain result at some point. So buyers are always a buyer is always a buyer. And so that's why upsells work, because buyers are buyers, right? People get this buying zone and they buy, and then they don't buy, right? But when a buyer's a buyer, they'll buy your stuff, they'll buy everybody else's stuff. And so what happens is on Facebook, that's kind of the intent, right? It's like this week you could be in this bucket, and then next week they put you in a bunch of non-buyers, right? And now it's like the offer doesn't really convert, and we call this the wobble, right? And typically, like when you increase the ad spend and you go higher volume, you have this wobble. So imagine a boat, right? It's a little boat in an ocean, and there's the water is like all, there's a storm, water is going crazy. The little boat can get tipped over. But if you have a big boat, it can withstand the wobble. And that analogy is basically like your AOV is the big boat. So if you have that 10X we talked about earlier, you can withstand the wobble, right? So now instead of, 2X ROAS, like, doubling your money on Facebook, you might just break even, and that's okay. You're still not losing money. Remember, you can spend more than other people, and you don't lose money. You're still getting data, because as long as that's happening, you can optimize, right? You can look at, okay, gender specific, who has a higher AOV, who has a higher CPA, what ads work to who better, et cetera. So you can start slicing it, right? But then like if you go to Google, the only intent there is keywords. So Google stability is a lot higher, because like you got to look at what people go into Google, they search and they leave, right? So the intent is always very similar, right? So Google is a lot more stable. So once you get something working in Google, you can run for like years without touching it. YouTube at the same time, are people watching your ads? What's the reaction? Are they clicking through? How long are they watching, etc.? So you have to look at that data. And the other thing is also like what happens after they click on the ad to your page from that ad? What happens to that? Like how long do they stay on page? How long they, like, so if you're using Wisty on the video and your video is still on the page, you can tell like how long people watch on average, and you can look at their data from different ads, how long they watch, and et cetera. So yeah, that's kind of a little detour, but I think it's important, all those things to consider.
Yeah. So Ray Dalio said something. He said, the stuff that I don't know, I don't know how he phrased it, but he said the stuff that I don't know sort of far outweighs the stuff that I do know. And that's really the kind of the situation here. But yeah, in a nutshell, you can use data to gather more information and sort of make decisions based on that. And this sort of ties a lot into this next idea that I wanted to cover here, which is the idea of AI in ad networks, and sort of how ad networks are getting increasingly smarter and smarter. And so if you think about advertising, and let's take Facebook as an example, advertising on Facebook. If you think back to even, 2000, I don't know, let's say 2014 or something like that, the way that you were good at running Facebook ads, the skill set that you needed to run Facebook ads has changed. The things that you needed to be good at are not the same anymore. So what I mean by that, to sort of get specific with you, is, running ads on Facebook in 2014, being able to choose the right targeting was kind of critical to the success of the advertising. And now we have this increase in how smart the ad networks are, that some of those things are sort of obsolete now. And so that's why we just kind of spent quite a bit of time talking about data driven decision making, and just, using a lot of different ad creatives, because something as simple as choosing targeting, like even if you go out there right now and you create a Facebook ads campaign and you choose your targeting and so on, I don't have, the answer that this is absolutely the way it is, but I have a feeling that no matter how you choose your targeting, at the end of the day, Facebook knows 1,000 times better where you're going to have more success. And so my point is, like, if you choose a group of people to target and Facebook actually knows that, this other group that you didn't choose, we're actually going to get way better results over here, so we're actually going to deploy our budget over here. They're going to do that because that's in everybody's best interest. And so the ad networks are getting just more and more intelligent. And so something as simple as choosing the right targeting is no longer as important. And so the way, as we just kind of touched on, to be successful with ads in today's age is testing a lot of different ad creatives, and then looking at the data from like 1,000 different angles and trying to figure out, what don't you know, and being able to sort of patch that up so that it works. But it's an interesting time. And I mean, if you really think about it, a lot of, like, if you think about creativity, it's kind of, I think, hard to maybe teach a computer to be creative, but you could feed a computer, 5 different product images. The computer has access to words. It can create words. The computer has access to all the colors in the color palette. So you could have a computer create, millions of variations of ad creatives, both from, an image perspective and copywriting even. And then you have the computer or the AI in the ad network sort of able to decipher all the data and make decisions on that. I mean, I really see sort of AI taking over as far as advertising goes, like a lot, in the very, very near future, where the human input is going to get quite small. And really, the only value that we're going to bring is being able to create ad creatives that the computer can't really create it himself or itself, But Alan, any thoughts to add on just the rise of AI and ad networks?
Yeah, I think like we need to add some like geometry to the and depth to the thought. Like I don't think people realize how deep this goes, right? Because like we only see surface level. Like so, for example, right? Like every human being on the planet has a tracking device attached to them in the form of a cell phone, right? So like, for example, think about Google. Okay, so like Google Android, right? It's massive. So you have like Google Search, which everything you ever search for is there, right? You have Google Chrome, right? Most popular browser in the world. Anything you ever, every URL you ever went to is logged. So they know exactly what sites you look. They know how much you spend, how much time you spend on the site. They know how much you scroll on the site. They know what videos. They own YouTube. They know what videos you watch. They know what comments you leave. They know if you have a phone and you go into like, say, some car dealership, they know that what car, if you go to a wine store, they know you're in a wine store. So you start to see wine ads. If you use Google Pay, they do it. On top of that, they like buy data, right? So all the text messages you sent, they know. So like they also buy data from like credit card companies, so they know what you buy. So you have this like real creepily accurate profile of people, right? And the same thing with Facebook, right? And so the thing is, like, you really got to look at these things as like advertising / economic engines, right? And it's in their best interest for you to spend more money advertising. And the only way you'll spend more money advertising if you get the good result, so like this whole thing there's, right now, like the big topic in our society is privacy, and it's for this reason alone, because it's like there really is no privacy. I mean, everything is being tracked. Like, I mean, they even track, like, for example, Google knows how much you sleep based on like, when you put the phone down, how you put it down and it's back to charge, to like how it is, like, when you're using it, like, upright in your pocket or purse, right? It also looks at like if you're running, like how fast you're moving, the altimeter is going up and down, what apps are you using running apps. It knows like when you're in the gym, it's what music you're playing, listening to, it's crazy. Like, so you have all these data points on people, and it's like I saw some graphs somewhere on Facebook. There's like hundreds of thousands of data points this thing uses to like, it's actually like quite beautiful if you really think about it, like as far as like what it's able to do. And I mean, like I said, like we're able to get like 18 to 50% conversion rate on our offers, and that before, like 10 years ago, before all this, you get like 1 to 3% and you're good.
Right.
You're good, you're real good. But
That's
now
a
it's
really
like
good point.
Yeah, and the reason it can do it, it can match you with the right buyers. Like we're living in like a very special time because it's like it's there, but it's not overly saturated and it's not quite regulated yet, you know? And so, like I'm sure like a lot of people, listening to us talk, is like there'll be times where like, you're hanging out with a friend and like your friend says something and you go on Facebook and the damn thing is there. Like I remember one time going into the store, right? Went to a store and we looked at this jacket and this brand I never heard, I've never seen. I asked my friend, have you ever heard of this brand? And next thing I'm seeing ads on Facebook for this brand. I'm like, this is so weird. Like, and this happens so many times, right? And they also know when you're at work, when you're most likely to buy. Yeah, it's crazy. It gets really, really freaking deep. And they also, like I said, they buy data. If you really want to know like all the data points, like, scratching the surface, you can go to this thing called SRDS. Every local library in the United States has one. It's this book called Standard Rate Data Service. And before all this stuff, that's how you would find like mailing lists, et cetera. It's also like a really good way to find markets. You go to the SRDS book and you can find list brokers and you can find buyers who buy direct mail. So like if you want to build an offer, you go to the SRDS book, you find some brokers and you can look at recency of buyers. So you can see who's buying what. And then you can literally go to Alibaba and, run some Shopify stores using this little trick, and like you can kill it and then you can just match it with the Facebook AI. Yeah. So, and also Gmail. How can I forget Gmail, right? Google owns Gmail. So they read and track every Gmail.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I read this thing where it's like if you order anything from Amazon, Google scans and sees like a receipt for this purchase from Amazon. So it knows what you're buying, and so, all that, it's pretty insane. Oh, and they also buy like phone data from carriers too. And so they're triangulating that too.
They know more than we do, that's for sure, about ourselves.
Yeah, but it's a good thing for us, it's good. I'm like, it's, it allows us to do something that we could never dream of doing, before.
Yeah, interesting points about that. The next thing that I wanted to ask you about is this idea of basically running ads to different kinds of people. We talked about different buckets of people and there's different way to segment people, but what about this idea of the value of running ideas to prospects versus running ideas to buyers? Are they worth the same, or what's the difference between the value in buyers and non-buyers and so on?
Right. So one thing we get a lot when people come to us to work with us, it's like, hey, I have this high ticket program, it's killing it, right? I'm like, well, where? To what audience, right? And they're typically like, oh, joint venture partners, yada, 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 right? And we hear this a lot. It's like, I can sell high ticket stuff as long as, somebody else turns them into a buyer, and warms them up. And that's the idea that like, historically speaking, like a buyer is worth, I'd say 5 to 20x, maybe even 50 to 100x these days than what like a prospect is, right? And so, when you're, I don't know if we're going to talk about this later, but I'll just touch upon it now. It's like, every market is not created equal. So when somebody comes to me and they're like, I have this to offer, I have this, I have that, and these are the numbers, I'm like, well, from what traffic, right? So they're like, from joint venture partners. Well, I'm like, okay, great. But that's all buyers. So it's like people that buy, like you have like a transfer of authority, transfer of trust and everything taking place. So the conversion rates are a lot higher, right? Whereas like if you have just prospects, the conversion rates are a lot lower. So there's always going to be more prospects than buyers. So like all prospects become buyers, but buyers are worth 5 to 20x. And so like a lot of people don't really distinguish that. But once you get a buyer onto your like data segment, let's say on Facebook, like an audience buyer audience, you should be really hammering them to sell them more stuff because those people are super responsive. They're worth like 20x. So, like you can run the upsells. You can do what we call an inversion. You can run the upsells as a front end to buyers and they'll buy. We have a client in she's a mental health therapist, helps other mental health therapists gets clients. And, one thing we did with her was, you run the front end offer. And then what you do is like when they become buyers, you do an inversion, you take the upsell and you sell it for $100 or $200 as a front end, and they buy just as well. And then they go to the back end of $5,000 to $10,000 and it works really well. But you got to realize that not everything is created equal and buyers are worth a lot more because you have that activation energy took place and they also voted with their credit cards. And also the other thing is just to be really aware of like looking at when people talk about data, you always have to say, well, what data are you talking about? Like where, is it cold? What is it? Is it warm? Like, I mean, Facebook and Google and YouTube, like I would even say that that's not even cold traffic. I think that's the warm, like that's kind of like warm traffic because all the, the stuff they do for you, like real cold traffic is like, running on native ads like Taboola or Rev Content or whatever, or Gemini and, being on homepage of Yahoo where you really have to take somebody from like pure cold to a sale,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Something that you touched on a little bit before, and actually something that we will be discussing a little bit later on as well, kind of on a platform specific basis, is just the idea of how the different ad ecosystems are different.
Mm.
So maybe we don't have to go into too much detail right now, but how important is it to consider, the different modalities of the different ad networks and why that person is on the platform and so on when you're running advertising?
Yeah, it's super important, right? So people, like I said, like people treat ads like just like this like thing. It's like, hey, here's an ad, run, right? But it's like you have to really ask yourself, like, well, why was this network created in the first place? Like, what was the birth of it, right? So,
Mhm.
like Facebook was built to socialize, right? Instagram was built to share images, right? Share stuff, and YouTube was created to share videos, right? And create videos, and Google was, there for information. And so, like the user base of each of those networks is a certain modality of it. Like, so for example, like when you're watching TV, you're in a different mind state than when you're listening to music or radio, or when you're kind of like reading a book, right?
Yeah.
Or a magazine. It's different. You respond to different things. So you have to kind of look at what people are there, but like what you really have to pay attention to is how the flow, how the user moves around that, the network. That's the important thing to look at. Like, it's like you have to look at it. So for example, like if you're like, when you're on Facebook, right? Like, you have to look at how you flow around the ads on Facebook. You're scrolling, right? And then it's like your ad is between like, typically 3 to 5 posts or something like that. And then it has to stop the person scrolling and then go into this ad to go deeper, right?
Mhm.
Okay. But at the same time, that person you have to battle, all the other content there above and below you and a little bit to the side of you. And then you also have to battle the chat, the people chat on Facebook, right? I mean, it depends on if you're on the phone or a computer. If you're on a computer, you have to battle the stupid chat box on the right. And that's the other thing, by the way, speaking of that, missed that earlier. Like, you have to really look at mobile versus desktop. I don't know if we have it in our notes to talk about it,
Yeah.
but like mobile, yeah. So that you have to look at that data as well. It's converting better on mobile, on desktop, and then you have to kind of like separate out those campaigns and kind of, if you really want to hone in on it. But you have to look at Facebook as like how people experience Facebook in order to go. So like Facebook typically is like top to bottom, right? So
Mhm.
like when your ad is scrolling, it has to work in that fashion, top to bottom, to stop them and then kind of pause and then to go into it, right? And so that's what it's built for. It's built for comments, etc., right? Whereas like YouTube is built for viewing videos. So like like the type of video you have on Facebook wouldn't really necessarily translate well over to YouTube, because it's different. Like, because a person is there, they're committed to watching a video, right? So they want to watch like, a 30-minute video. And typically what happens in a YouTube ad is like, let's say a 30-minute video, let's say we're watching Joe Rogan for 3 hours, right? What happens, like there's these little pauses that are like, hey, here's the thing for 5 seconds. And if you watch it to the end, you get charged. And if you just skip, you don't. But it's like you have the 5 seconds to capture their attention, or they can skip your ad. So you have like, maybe 5 to 10 seconds. You have to call them out, kind of like punch it, call out the people that are interested in your stuff. Otherwise, they're going to continue watching Joe Rogan. So they're less likely to leave, right? So they're not going to leave like the Joe Rogan podcast to go watch another video. So you have a lot more time commitment on YouTube. Instagram is like, it's like it's fast scrolling. So it's a lot faster than Facebook. Like Facebook, people are scrolling slow. They're reading stuff. Well, Instagram, they're kind of scrolling fast, right? It's like, so you have to have a lot more impactful ad to stop that scroll to go into that, right? And then what's the other one? Google. And Google, of course, is just search, right? So with Google, it's like, you're searching. But the big thing about these to consider also, like, where does it go, right? So like if you have like an ad that's purely on YouTube, then typically like it go into another video, like a VSL, it would do the best, right? But that's why like the type of web pages run are hybrids. So you have a video, you have the information, you have everything. So it doesn't matter where they come from. There's still something for them, and it still captures that extension of the ad they're looking at, right? So yeah, so same thing with Google. Like if somebody's going on Google, you got two type of things. You have Google Display Network, where people are reading articles and such, and you got Google Search, right? And then like the big thing to do on Google Search is to run branded search, etc. I think you talked about it, Robert. But people are seeking information, so your ad has to be informative. It has to be kind of extension of that, right? So it has to fit into the ecosystem where people exist. And this is more on the creative end, right? But again, like we talked about, like creative end is like, it's important, but it's really not that important, but it should be considered. Like the mechanical stuff is the easiest. Creative is like little work. And the way you create ads, like, what is that? What is that? Canva? Like, I think it's called Canva. You go to Canva, you can shoot like video ads, whatever, you can do PowerPoint ads, etc. So yeah, I mean, you got to look at why the ecosystem was built, and then like why you're doing what you're doing. Like typically we recommend just starting, with Facebook, because it's the lowest budget required, and you can get 500 to 1,000 sales a day on Facebook, and then going over to YouTube, and then going over to Google, and then having one basis network as the primary network, and then you have supporting networks where the retargeting takes place. And we
Yeah.
find that strategy to be really well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know for me, this idea or this topic was like kind of abstract. It took me a while to really get it. So just
Mm-hmm.
for purposes of, illustrating this point, or to really drive the point home, I pulled some numbers just to give you some form of practical data that makes you realize that these platforms are different and people come to these platforms for different reasons, and they're in different mental states
Oh,
when they do. So
I want to add one more thing to that before you continue. Really important. That's very true. And physically, they're in different locations, right? Think about that. Okay. So like when you're in the bathroom doing your thing, right? You're typically on Instagram, right? Or maybe YouTube, right? Or somewhere. Like it depends. Like each network caters to where you are. Like like when you're on the couch, at night doing some research, you might be on Google. So like they also lend themselves to different areas, and time allotment too. Like, so if you're on Instagram, sometimes you can just get off for 5 minutes, scroll what's going on, because you don't have a lot of time.
yeah. So as far as the data goes, I just pulled two companies, IBM and Netflix. One is a pure B2B company and one is a pure B2C company. And then I pulled the likes from those companies from Facebook and from LinkedIn, just to kind of prove the point here. So on Facebook, IBM has 1 million likes and Netflix has 65 million likes. And on LinkedIn, so in that case, obviously Netflix has way more. On LinkedIn, IBM has 8 million likes and Netflix has 5 million likes. And the only point I'm trying to make with that is, again, people go to different networks for different reasons, and they are in different mental states and so on, and different audiences, of course, right? So like the point I was just making here was on LinkedIn, a B2B company all of a sudden has way more likes, even though B2B in general isn't even prone to sort of getting likes and so on the way that B2C content or companies are. But they're different, and it's something to definitely consider when you're trying to be successful with your advertising.
Right.
The next thing to kind of touch on here, Alan, is this idea of being in like, which market are you in? Are you offering hope to people to sort of create a better life or whatever? Or are you in the fear market of trying to save them from something? What are your thoughts around those ideas?
Yeah. Yeah. So, like they call it, we kind of got this idea from the stock market, like bear market, et cetera. So it's like, the thing is, it's like a lot of markets are like hope or fear markets, right? And typically like different markets lend to different things, right? So like I know a lot of guys are now selling a lot of supplements, right? And like a lot of the supplements are based on increasing immunity, et cetera. And so they're in a fear market because of what's happening globally with the Corona stuff, right? And so, they're all their ads are basically on kind of anchored on that, right? Whereas it's like hope market would be something like, build a better life,
Mm-hmm.
build a better business, et cetera. I mean, you can have, we could say, if you wanted to build a better business, like build a business so, you don't go bankrupt, whatever, because of the thing. So every market, like, you'll see the texture of it. There's like hope or fear. It's like, optimism or pessimism is a better way to put it. Like based on if there's optimism in the market or if there's pessimism in the market, is that you need to anchor your ads based on that in order to kind of go where the emotion is. It's like you have to have an emotion. So if there's like a lot of pessimism in the market and you're coming in like selling to the, when there's there with like a lot of optimism, that's gonna be really hard because, you have like all these news stations, news channels, everybody on YouTube, everybody around them is like super pessimistic and you're, oh, here's some optimism, right? Or on the flip side, like let's say last year when the economy was like, at an all-time high, you have like optimism everywhere. And then if you came in with like pessimism, it'd be like, what? It wouldn't really work. So you have to really kind of figure out where your market is. Is it based in hope, or is it fear, or is it optimistic, or is it pessimistic, right? And then like a lot of your ads should have that texture. You're going to extrapolate that on the emotional fabric of the market. And then from there, you can, the ad, click-through rate, conversion, et cetera, will go through the roof. I mean, an example of that would be like, right now we're because of Corona, we have this like pessimistic market, right? Very like pessimistic market everywhere. And like, you can see it because like all these conspiracy theory guys are getting like a billion views, and it's like all this crazy stuff, right? But like when we were an optimistic market, like those guys, couldn't get any attention, and so that also dictates where attention goes.
Yeah. And I mean, if you really think about it, we tend to pay a lot more money to fix our pain or to run from fear than or at least maybe not always more money, but it's sort of an easier conversion a lot of times. If you think about, if you have a toothache and it's really bad, like you're not really going to be sitting on that for a long time until you do something about it and go to the dentist, And when it comes to hope, it's like, okay, yeah, actually, this is a good way to think about it. So if you have really a bad toothache, like how long are you going to be sitting on that until you go to the dentist versus like your teeth are okay, but you would like to maybe have whiter teeth and straighter teeth. And so maybe one day you're like, I might get some veneers or I might go get a teeth whitening or something like that. Like there's a huge difference there in like how quickly people pull the trigger and actually how much money they would spend to do one versus the other as well. So another thing to consider in your advertising.
Yeah, the human brain is more so wired for fear than hope, right? Because even religion is ultimately rooted in hope, but there's also the fear of if I do wrong, there's going to be consequences, right?
Yeah.
Etc. So it's like fear is rooted into our DNA because it allows for survival. So like those that were more aware of things that make you afraid, like if you go into the jungle and you see a snake and you're afraid of it, you move, it's not going to bite you, you're going to live to reproduce, whereas like if you're walking and there's a snake and you're like, oh, who cares? It bites you and you're dead, right? So it's like people respond well. And I mean, you can see this is very evident from all these like news channels pandering fear all the time, it's like there's nonstop like fear mongering, but like you can't fight that, right? Like you have to figure out where it is. And I'm not saying like, we're not saying like go and, create fear or pessimism or optimism in the market. It's like channel it, like, where it is and, focus on it. But typically like your market will be inherently built on one or the other. So for example, like the survival market is built on fear and pessimism, right? What if, this happens and the whole thing collapses? I got to be prepared, So that's a survival space, like preppers, right? Whereas like, what would be an optimism of what would be
Personal development?
Yeah. So exactly. Personal development is always based on optimism, optimistic and hope, right? It's like better tomorrow, going to do tomorrow, right? So if you come there with some pessimistic stuff, they're like, fuck off. It's like, we don't want, get that out of here. Right. So, so you have to really figure out what your market is ultimately rooted in and focus on that. Now, every market will have one, it's a gradient. It's not end all be all. Pessimistic markets will have optimistic people. Optimistic markets will have pessimistic people. But ultimately, like your market should be on more so dictated on either side.
Yeah. Are you running from pain or trying to gain pleasure? It's another way to think about it. Good stuff. The next thing to discuss here is interesting, is this idea of, spying on other people's advertising in order to be successful with your advertising. And it's funny because we have seen this firsthand, not just with our ads, but the way, when we talk of just be aware that like when we talk about spying on ads and so on, or modeling other people, we don't mean copy. We have had people, like I created this ad for our first offer that we did together. It was the first ad that I created. And then another really successful company actually in our space, they created the exact same ad. Like they found the same background video. They found the same font. They found the same colors. They even went as far as somehow identifying the background music that I used in the video. And they used that as well to push their product. So we're going to talk about ad spying, but the way that we think about it is like, how can you use that to see what's already working and then kind of model that to make your stuff work, but don't copy other people. But yeah, Alan, how can you use sort of ad spying to better,
Right.
to run better ads?
So one thing I want to say before we talk about ad spying is like, so we get copied a lot. The interesting thing though is like one of the reasons we focus on the 10x economics of a front end offer, right? We talked about in the beginning of this, is because that truly makes it irrelevant if people copy you. So like we got copied the other day, like some two guys copied our entire offer, right? And so we have to like get that taken down. But yeah, it's like when your economics are so good, like nobody can really copy you because they all oftentimes will copy the front end stuff, but then it's like not possible to copy the back end stuff. But regarding ad spying, like you don't want to go out there like so, ultimately everything we do right here and everywhere else, you know, like, I don't care who tells you how smart they are, you know, whatever, right? It doesn't matter. Like, ultimately, it's the best guess in time, right? So like, for example, everything we're telling you now is just accumulation of everything we know, everything we experienced, tested, tried, failed, everything. And we're telling you, so this is what works now. This is our best guess in time. And even with everything we know, we still go out there and we're like, okay, what's going on? And then we optimize from there, right? So if that's true, which it is, which is a guess best in time, then it would be like, well, what's a better way to get a best guess in time? And the best way to do it is to spy on other people, to say, okay, well, who's spending money where, right? And so what you do is, like, you know, it depends on the ecosystem. Like, so if you're on Google, you can just go to Google keyword tool and, you know, whatever, there's like a million of these things, right? You can go get, what's that thing called? AdBeat. There's a bunch of these other platforms. I got to look them up. I think we can maybe include it as like a bonus here somewhere around this. But, you know, you go to these different areas and like you just type in the keywords and you start to see ads. And so like one of the things I used to do when I used to run nutritional supplements, it was mostly Google based. Like I would take the ad copy, right? And I would enter it into Google, and then I would click on, I would like look, you know, the timeline, you know, on Google search, you can change the date duration. I would say, you know, last year or 2 years, whatever. And then I would look at the cache. So, you know, like, you know how Google can cache a page?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what Google does actually caches the ad, right? And so I look at the cached ad. So I'm like, okay, if this ad is running today and they're cached from like 6 months ago, that means this ad's been around 6 months. Okay. So that means this ad's, you know, they're spending money and they're on all these sites and they're running the same ads for 6 months. So the only way anybody can do that is if they're making money, right? If it's profitable. Like nobody can be losing money for 6 months on ad. Like human nature won't dictate it unless you're like some crazy branding company. But yeah, so you do that, and then the same thing on Facebook. Like, you know, if you see the same ads running over and over and over again, okay, pay attention to that. You can just go there, click page transparency. You can see how long the ad's been running, etc. And it'll tell you. Now, like, few people have tried to create software to spy on Facebook ads, like, you know, like creating a bunch of accounts that got sued. So don't do that. But, you know, you can just kind of look at it. And ad spying really is more intuition than a science. Like if you look at it and you just pay attention to it, you can kind of see, you know, what's happening. And then the correlation to ad spying is like, you want to go to like SimilarWeb. It used to be Compete, but I think they're out of business. You go to similarweb.com and you type in the domain URL and you can see how much traffic somebody's getting. So it's like, okay, you see this ad, they're going to this domain, SimilarWeb. You look at that traffic on SimilarWeb, you see like, you know, X amount of clicks, and, you know, you can put the two and two together. It's a successful offer. And then that's your best guess in time. And you start looking at it and like doing something similar. Don't copy it. Not cool, you know, because you know, you got to respect other people's work. But, you know, you do, you know, like we were the first in the marketplace to basically just like run an ad as a book, just put a book image and run ad. And now it's like a lot of people are doing it, and that's fine. They're not copying us. They're kind of doing what we did, but they didn't completely copy us. They just modeled us, which is totally fine. Because there's really nothing that original. It's just a recombination of a million different ideas, right? And that's it. That's how you ad spy.
Yep. So use it to, you know, for inspiration, angle ideas, creative ideas, and so on. The other thing I wanted to chat about today is, so for anybody who's watching this that has, you know, even 1 day's worth of experience in advertising, has probably heard of AIDA, or AIDA, attention, interest, desire, and action. And Alan, you've kind of put a tiny spin on it to sort of update it for the modern times. So what is the new AIDA? Can you explain that for us?
Yeah. So there's a bunch of different formulas for copywriting, right? I'm not going to get into that here, but like AIDA is like one of the, you know, mostly used: attention, interest, desire, action. So you got to get their attention with the headline, you know, build up interest through the opening, build up desire through the testimonials, case studies, proofs, and then action with the button at the bottom, buy now, right? So that's true, right? Or was true. But now, like, we've modified it, and there's this thing called attention, interest, desire. And then before the action takes place, they'll do verification and validation, right? And so typically what will happen is, like, when somebody comes to your page to buy, they're going to see, okay, they want to look you up. Okay, what are the reviews? Are other people talking about you? You know, are you a scammer? Are you this? Are you that? So attention, interest, desire, verification / validation, and then action, right? So I can't tell you like how many times we've had people, you know, that we work with, they were like, you know, oh, I wanted to buy, but then, like, you know, I had to talk to other people in your group to see if you were legit, and people said you were great, and then I'm buying your stuff, right? And so that's why like joint ventures or buyers, and we talked about that, like you know, convert so well is, or like, you know, like when I did consulting, like all the clients were basically from word of mouth, right? And because that word of mouth is verification, validation, so it already is built in, right? So, but most people completely ignore it. They don't engineer this in their process. So they assume that person is going to go out there and verify. Well, they assume that people are not going to verify or validate their stuff, and they just completely ignore it. So like you have to be aware that it's going to take place, and you have to engineer it. So you have to say attention, interest, desire, verification, validation, and then action, right? Especially when it comes to buying high ticket stuff. On lower ticket stuff like $5, etc., not that important. It's really like, it's who cares, $5. But if somebody's paying you $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, $100,000 on the back end, then that's going to be very important, right? And so what you need to do is, instead of like kind of like saying that, you need to be at the forefront of that, and you need to basically say, hey, I know you're going to want to verify, validate everything I'm telling you. So let me just save you a whole bunch of time and go talk to these other people, and then you're good,
Yeah, it's really important. And one thing that I've observed with myself is I'll be on somebody's sales page, and I'll literally, like, I've noticed my brain when I'm on testimonial number 3, I still think they're a scammer. When I'm on testimonial number 4, I start to warm up and I'm like, maybe not. Testimonial number 5, I'm like, okay. Testimonial number 6, I'm like, these guys are legit. Like,
Yeah.
And this is without thinking. This is just something I've noticed in my brain where I'm not consciously putting thought into it. I've just, if there's enough testimonials, my brain just goes, okay, they wouldn't go through the trouble of getting these many testimonials that are fake. Like, it has to be real. And that's a really, I think, interesting thing. And that's sort of what Alan's talking about, is just this idea of verifying, the claims and just proving that what you're saying is true and so on. And I would actually disagree with you, Alan, that it's not as important on the low dollar sales. It's not as important because the money is very little, but I think it has equal weight in converting the sale as it does on a high ticket, just from my perspective and my buying stuff. Because like when I see X amount of testimonials, I'm like, okay, I'm in,
Well, yeah, well, exactly. Like, I mean, I agree with you there. So like the thing is, like, it's interesting because like I do this everywhere, right? So like me, I'm like, I see, something gets my attention, gets my interest. Okay, I want to go buy it. And the next thing you know, I'm on like forums. I'm on Reddit. I'm on Googling different forums. I'm on Quora. I'm looking what other people have to say about it, right? And so what's interesting, like, if you look at, the biggest e-com store or digital store in history, or any stores, Amazon, right? They figured this out a long time ago. They're like, hey, you know what? People are going to want to verify, validate. So let's just let people ask questions and leave reviews, right?
Yeah.
So when I'm shopping on Amazon, I go like, so for example, I bought a rowing machine, like Concept 2 rower, right? And I was like, man, I really want to watch TV shows while rowing because it's like boring to like, bang out 5,000 to 10,000 meters. And so I went on Amazon and I was looking for like a iPad stand, those little things. And it was like a bunch of them. And I'm like, okay, which one has the most reviews? Done, check. And I checked the reviews. Will it fill the iPad Pro? Yes, already done. Verification, validation done. People say good things, a verified buyer. And I'm like, sold. And I bought it. I didn't really do much thinking, right? Whereas like before, all that, I'd had to go Google. I had to go to like different, forums and like ask questions and all this stuff, And so you want to help people save time doing that, do it for them, And then as far as testimonials goes, there's different degree of testimonials. There's like video testimonials, there's like written testimonials, there's like Facebook testimonials, etc. And so, that's kind of like an important distinction as far as that goes. But you're definitely right. Like, it depends. You want to have like objective third-party reviews, and if you look at like, for example, how a lot of these companies, like like mattress companies now, like Casper, Purple Bed, are sold. Like a lot of these, like online companies that like, or even like autonomous desk, like that little thinning desk. It's all based on them just like realizing this, and they just have this affiliate program or whatever, and like people get paid to leave reviews. And so you have like this whole cottage industry online of people doing nothing like reviews on mattresses or like computer desks or like computer stands or whatever, right? It's because they're doing a verification validation. So like, I can't tell you how many there are like tech reviewers on YouTube now. It's like a million of them, right? And that's all that's all this industry is basically just verifying, hey, is this the right thing for me? Is it good? I'm gonna go buy it, right?
Yeah. And one really important note on this, by the way, we've talked about this before a lot, is that we all verify things differently. Meaning, some people verify things by watching a testimonial. Some people verify things by watching 20 testimonials. Some people verify things by reading a testimonial. Some people verify by reading 20 testimonials. Some people verify things not by testimonials, but by case studies, right? So they have to see the whole process. Some people only do it through their own firsthand experience. So they, you're not really going to have them verify anything until they sort of do it themselves.
Hmm.
So that's really important to consider as well. Like not everybody is the same when it comes to the verification process.
Yeah, yeah, but it's there either way. It's there, and you have to engineer it into your marketing, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're not on some guru thing, and they're like, I was just ready to buy their stuff, and then I just saw your stuff, and I went and bought your stuff and end up in our high program, right? So it's like it's because we just verified and validated things for them, and the other people didn't. And so we're aware of that. We engineered this into our marketing and advertising, and then like it saves that extra step when a person's spending energy doing that, and they can spend the energy into buying the stuff, making the decision to buy.
Yeah. So there's one more thing I wanted to touch on in this sort of topic. Before I do, I noticed there was one thing that bit of a rule that we tend to live by. We talked earlier about this, data-driven decision making and, testing different ad creatives is sort of the way to be successful with ads. And we just have this kind of rule to keep in mind. So I wanted to throw it in there because we forgot to mention it, which is that basically 80% of your ads or your ad creatives are just the ones that are working, and then 20% of the budget is just testing new creatives all the time. Even if you're like 6 years in, super successful, you spend 20% of that budget like testing new creatives, trying to break the control. That's a really good way of
Well, yeah.
finding. Yeah.
And the other reason you want to spend 20% of your budget isn't just to break the control, is also because like ads fatigue, right? And so like
Yeah.
if you're running ads, like ads just fatigue, and so like people just see them, they're like, okay, I saw this ad, like it's enough, right? I'm tired of it. And so like you want to do that to test new ads to kind of combat ad fatigue, because your ads will fatigue, right? And the other thing is to especially like if you're running on Facebook, to basically try new bucket placements or whatnot, right? So like new campaigns, new targeting, new ads, new stuff. Because the way Facebook works is like, they'll allocate, your ads to a certain bucket of people, right? And like, you don't know what bucket, some buckets suck, some buckets are wildly profitable, right? And so you want to like spend that 20% of the budget being out there and trying new buckets.
Yeah, for sure. So the last thing that I wanted to touch on in this, idea of being, how to be successful in your advertising is retargeting. Most people probably familiar with what retargeting is, and we're going to dig into different levels of awareness later on, which gets a little bit deeper. But in a nutshell, the reason why retargeting works is you can take somebody who's going to Google and they type in swimming pool cleaner, right? That is somebody who knows that they have a swimming pool. They know that the swimming pool needs to be cleaned. They know what sort of they need to be able to do that, which is to find somebody. Like the awareness of that person is very, very high. And so typically when somebody is that high in their awareness, they're quite easy to convert because they already know what the problem is and what they need, right? The solution. And this is why retargeting works, is just by definition, you're showing advertising to people who have already been exposed to your products and so on. And so if you compare retargeting, where somebody's awareness is a bit higher because they've already seen your ads and your product, to a cold ad where, you're just interrupting somebody on Facebook, there's a big difference there. And so I wanted to kind of turn it over to you, Alan, and kind of get your take on, what role does retargeting play in being successful with ads. But I wanted to bring this into the conversation because I just had this realization that, everybody just kind of assumes that retargeting is a must and retargeting works. But I realized recently this is why it works, is because people that have a high awareness about the product and the company and so on, they're usually the easiest to convert. And that's why retargeting works really well. But to kind of bring it back a bit, what role does retargeting play in being successful with advertising?
Well, again, you got to look at it like where, it's not just, like, well, okay, yeah. Like a lot of people out there, when they're doing retargeting, they're just like retargeting back to the page, it's whatever, right? Like,
Yeah.
so one thing for our meta clients we're doing is like, we have a custom script where it's like time on page. So I did this like 10 years ago, right? 10 years ago. And like, I found like when we just did long sales letters, like how far people read to like retarget differently. So we have different mechanisms the way we treat retargeting, and like, what's the word? Intent, right? Like based on intent on the page dictates retargeting, right? So for example, like if somebody comes to our page and we have a timer there, so if it's like a JavaScript timer that's running in the background, it says like, if somebody is on a page for 20 seconds, load up this Facebook pixel for this audience, right? If somebody's there for a minute, load up this Facebook pixel. If somebody watches that video to the end, load up that pixel through Wistia. If somebody does this, load up the pixel. So it's like if somebody scrolls to the bottom of the page, load up this pixel. So where people, and this is like super advanced stuff you really don't need to do, but it's like you need to know where the intent of the page is in order to have the right retargeting, right? And then also like if somebody adds to cart, like you typically should have like a pixel fire like on the checkout page where enter credit card information, because that's a different type of personality,
Right.
retargeting, and that's a different ad. So if somebody goes to your checkout page, all the retargeting ads should say something like, hey, one item pending left in your cart, right? And so, we pay attention to Amazon, like for example, like I think like Amazon, like if you add to cart, or like other e-commerce stores, one item pending in cart, complete your order type of deal. So, if somebody goes to a checkout page, then it's typically like, one item pending in cart, new bonuses added, whatever, just to get them to buy. If somebody doesn't go to the cart, you don't want to run that because they're like, they didn't add the cart. It's a different person. If they came to your page, they just watched, say 10% of the video, then, your retargeting has to have videos that kind of like complete that thought, or you can just run that video as a whole, as an ad, right? To kind of complete that thought. And so, they could have left for a million reasons. Maybe they were busy. Maybe they put their phone down. Maybe they, they got a text message from somebody. I mean, like people aren't aware, like people think like when you're running ads or like retargeting ads and running these offers, that like somebody's sitting there devoting their entire time and attention space to you, right? It's like you're just like a small micro fragment of their environment, right? And it's interesting, right? Because you're battling other text messages, you're battling Snapchat, you're battling Instagram DMs, you're battling, YouTube, all that stuff. I know you battle that a lot. So you battle all that, and then like based on like how that person interacted with your page should dictate what type of retargeting you do. But generally speaking, it's like if somebody comes to your page and leaves, you should have video content, etc. And you should have an audience that retargets them with that, right? And then like, of course, like you can't retarget, you can't put videos on Google, but what you do is, you just have image ads on Google that put them back to your page. And then what you do is you can have on YouTube, you can do videos, to kind of bring them back, etc. But that's a really important, the biggest takeaway here is like when it comes to retargeting is to figure out where the intent on the page, and like if you're savvy with code or a little bit techy, you can implement a lot of this and like figure out the higher levels of intent. And I mean, you can even go like super, and I mean, it's stuff we do. It's like, like for example, like, our sales page has like 8 to 10, maybe 12 different buy buttons. We can push the order depending on what button they clicked to go there. Then we know like how deep they went down the page and like what area they were around. So if they were around the testimonial area that clicks the buy button, then you know what? The retargeting ads have a shit ton of testimonials. If they're down there somewhere by the, the proof shots, then you know what? The retargeting ads are going to have proof shots. If they're for example, up top to the right with a video, that's going to be up there with the video, Yeah, so you have to retarget the different levels of intent. Super, super important. Typically speaking, like when we first started doing retargeting, like 10, 12 years ago, I remember doing it. I can't remember what the network was. And it was like, it didn't really work. We found that like if somebody came and like didn't buy, getting them to buy was super hard. And then like we just couldn't figure out for a long time. And then once we started looking at like different levels of intent on the page and doing that, that's when it started working, right? And just to kind of extrapolate that, and you can do the same thing with emails, right? Like I mean, if you're tech savvy, something with like Active Campaign or something, you can put different triggers. If they click on this button, then do this email. If they scroll up to this page after you get it, yada 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 yada. So you can do a lot of that. Yeah. So I mean so you got to treat retargeting.
I think a lot of people look at retargeting as like this one thing, right? You were targeting to one type of person, but that's a really important thing that you bring up is you retarget to different levels of intent, because just because they saw your stuff before doesn't mean that two people that both saw your stuff, it doesn't mean that they're on the same level of sort of the intent scale and readiness to buy. One person might have just jumped on the page and watched 2 seconds of your video, and one person might have spent 20 minutes on the page, watched the whole video, gone to the order form, and then they got a phone call and they had to leave. Those are different people. And so we all know retargeting works, but it goes a little bit deeper than that with the different levels of intent. So,
All right, that summarizes how to succeed in advertising. And the next video lesson is about things to consider when you're creating ads.